Now, a couple of weeks ago, we put a video out on the channel about the Dark Enlightenment, the anti democratic ideology of techno feudal lords that's embedded itself into the United States government. You should go watch it. It's pretty great and really eye opening into what's going on in our government at the highest levels. What we're here to talk about today started off much in the same way, a single name that seemed interesting and one weird connection that didn't quite add up. But the deeper we dug, the more names appeared. Every connection led to three more. Every billionaire was friends with the same politicians. Every media company was owned by someone with the same ties. What started as, who is this person who just got hired at CBS, turned into a web so big we had to literally map it out just to keep track. And do you want to know what's batshit crazy? It's part of the same fucking web. The same people from our Dark Enlightenment video, Peter Thiel, Curtis Yarvin, JD Vance, they're all here too. This isn't a separate story, it's another part of the same story. And it's about who controls what you see, what you hear, and what you're allowed to think. Media control about one of the most important geopolitical conflicts of our time. Let's start at the beginning. This month, CBS News appointed Bari Weiss, a former New York Times columnist and founder of the media outlet The Free Press, to a newly created position, editor-in-chief of CBS News. Now, if you're not familiar with Bari Weiss, and you think, okay, maybe she's just a normal journalist. Nah, dog. She has proudly proclaimed herself to be a Zionist fanatic. And she now controls the editorial direction of one of America's top news networks. Weiss didn't land this job because she's the second coming of Walter Cronkite. To anyone born after the 90s, let me explain. Walter Cronkite was a really famous journalist that your parents' parents listened to back when TVs used to look like this and movies cost a quarter. So, as I was saying, she didn't get her job for being a great journalist. She got it because of who bought CBS News, who those people are friends with, and what they're trying to turn American media into. A Zionist propaganda factory for the Lord of Genocide. So let's talk about Bari Weiss, because understanding her career is the first step to understanding how this whole thing works. On paper, she's a free speech advocate. She's anti-cancel culture and anti-woke. She wants the swamp drained and hates all things anti-American. She dramatically quit the New York Times in 2020, claiming she was being bullied by her colleagues. So, she started the Free Press in 2021, positioning it as this brave alternative to biased mainstream media. She's made a career out of being a truth teller. But there's this other pattern in her career, and it goes back 20 years, not 5. It explains everything about why she's currently running CBS News, and it starts at Columbia University in the mid-2000s. Yes, the mid-2000s, Shrek 2 was dominating at the box office, Tom was helping you decide who to put in your top friends on MySpace, and the Motorola Razr, arguably the greatest phone ever invented, was taking the world by storm. What a time to be alive. Anyway, back to Bari Weiss. So, 2004 to 2007. This is when Weiss was a student at Columbia University, and during those years, she led Islamophobic campaigns against Arab professors, which is just as cruel and fucked up as it sounds. Her playbook was pretty straightforward. It's one you're very familiar with. Take their criticisms of Israeli government policy, reframe it as anti-Semitism, and then demand the university discipline or fire them. It got bad enough that the New York Civil Liberties Union had to step in, raising concerns about academic freedom. And I want you to lock in with me right now, because this is a clear-cut pattern. You're going to see it over and over again in Bari Weiss's career. She positions herself as this defender of free speech, open debate, and intellectual diversity. That whole tired spiel. But when it comes to Israel, nah. Shut it down. Don't say a word. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not secretly sneak $500 out of the bank to pay for when you accidentally land on the hotel your friend has built on Park Place. Fucking Park Place. Like, the game's over at this point. Just give it up. Maybe try a different game. I don't know. Maybe sorry. Look, this tactic isn't anything you don't know. You've witnessed it nonstop for the last 2 years. And this was 20 years ago. She's an OG shill. She was simping for Netanyahu before Marvel released Iron Man. That's dedication. So, then in 2017, Weiss got hired at the New York Times as an opinion writer and editor. That's a pretty big deal, right? In journalist standards, the New York Times is a prestigious job. And almost immediately, the same tensions start showing up. She writes a 2019 column going after Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, accusing her of anti Semitic conspiracy theories. The column gets major backlash because, again, she's conflating criticism of Israeli policy with anti Semitism and anti Jewish sentiment. Tensions inside the Times newsroom gets worse. Other journalists are pushing back. Taylor Lorenz even calls out Weiss for describing the whole situation as a woke civil war, saying it's a complete mischaracterization of what's actually happening. Then, in July 2020, Weiss quits. But she doesn't just resign quietly like a normal person. She publishes this letter that goes completely viral. She claims she's being harassed and bullied by progressive colleagues who just can't tolerate her views. The letter becomes this massive rallying point for anti-woke conservatives. It's everywhere, and she's being held up as a martyr. The pattern, the exact same one from Colombia, where she positions herself as the victim while allegedly trying to eliminate other people's voices. Colombia 2004, New York Times 2020. According to her critics, same tactics, different building. So, the Times chapter ends, but Weiss's influence just getting started. Because what she does next is launch her own media company, the Free Press. And when October 7th happens in 2023, she's ready for it, with decades of training behind her. Now, the elevator pitch for the Free Press is basically, we're the alternative to mainstream media. We'll publish stories and perspectives you won't find anywhere else. We're real news, no bias here, blah, blah, fucking blah. You know, if I had a nickel for every conservative-leaning news publication that claims to be unbiased but truly does nothing but push ultra-right-leaning talking points, well, I'd be rich enough to run a conservative-leaning news publication that claims to be unbiased but truly does nothing but push ultra-right-leaning talking points. At least us here at Red Mirror Media admit to our biases. We know we lean low into the left. We embrace it. We thrive on it. It gives us our much-needed solidarity energy. And look, for a while, if you were to take a look at the Free Press, they did publish across political spectrum. You've got some left-leaning pieces here, some right-leaning pieces there. It's got this vibe of, we're not really beholden to any ideology. Until October 7th. Now, what happens after this? Well, the Free Press's coverage starts showing a very clear editorial line, and it's not subtle. They're running pieces that dispute whether there's actually famine happening in Gaza, even though the United Nations and multiple medical organizations on the ground are documenting mass starvation. They're framing the entire conflict as civilization versus barbarism. Civilization versus barbarism. Not a complex geopolitical situation with civilians suffering on multiple sides, not a military operation with legitimate questions about proportionality and war crimes. Nope. Civilization versus barbarism. And then, investigative journalists start digging into where some of this content is actually coming from, and they find out that a significant chunk of the Free Press's Middle East coverage is being produced in collaboration with a pro-Israel nonprofit think tank, ironically called the Center for Peace Communications. Now, what is the Center for Peace Communications? Well, as I said before, it's a nonprofit whose board includes senior figures from major pro-Israel think tanks in Washington, organizations like the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. One of their most prominent board members is Dennis Ross, who's been one of the most visible supporters for Israel in D.C. for decades. So, October 7th is where it was clear and obvious to anyone with the ability to read that the Free Press served as Israeli propaganda. But it was actually first apparent for those watching Bari's content in November 2022, when Bari interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu on her podcast. Picture this. Benjamin Netanyahu is about to return to power as Prime Minister of Israel. He's putting together what will be one of the most right-wing coalition governments in Israeli history. international observers are concerned about what this means, so naturally, Bari Weiss gives him a platform. So, does this long interview with Netanyahu, and it gets published on the Free Press. And look, interviewing world leaders isn't automatically a problem, right? Journalists talk to controversial figures all the time. But as a journalist, are you challenging them? Or are you pushing back on their framing? Are you just giving them a microphone to deliver their talking points? This was no different than when Andrew Schultz softballed Trump, or when the Nelk boys played footsie with Netanyahu while staying up late and talking about boys. But there is a pretty big fucking difference here. They don't claim to be journalists like Bari Weiss does. They couldn't conduct themselves as journalists if they tried. So, during the conversation, Weiss and Netanyahu talk about Trump having dinner with Kanye West and Nick Fuentes, literal anti Semites, by the way. Netanyahu brushes it off, and while he says it was wrong, he also said about Trump that he's been a tremendous supporter of Israel and that he's deeply grateful for what he's done. Zero pushback from Weiss. They discuss Netanyahu's brother, who died famously during Israeli military operations. And Netanyahu describes the broader conflict using almost identical language to what the Free Press will later use about Gaza. He calls it a civilizational battle, barbarians versus freedom, and human rights. Notice the framing. It's not a political conflict. It's not about competing national interests or disputed territory or military occupation. It's barbarians versus civilization. The same exact language the Free Press will use a year later when they're covering Gaza. This is an alignment, not an interview. A shared worldview between the journalist and the subject, and that worldview gets baked into every piece of coverage that follows. So, now we've got the full picture of who Bari Weiss is, right? Decades of pro-Israel advocacy going back to her college days. A media outlet that partners with pro-Israel think tanks to produce its Middle East content. A personal interview with Netanyahu where they both describe Palestinians using dehumanizing language. And now, she's editor-in-chief of CBS News. So how does this happen? How does someone with this track record end up running editorial at one of the three major American broadcast networks? Well, the answer is in who just bought CBS. A father worth almost $400 billion and a son who just closed a massive media merger. And both of them have extremely direct, extremely well-documented ties to the Israeli government. Let me introduce you to the Ellisons. Larry Ellison, co-founder of Oracle Corporation with a net worth of $393 billion. And he's not just some rich asshole. He's Benjamin Netanyahu's personal friend. And I don't mean they met at a conference once. No, I mean let's hang out at my private Hawaiian island type shit. Larry Ellison donated $16.6 million directly to the nonprofit Friends of the IDF. That is the largest single donation that organization has ever received. Ever. Larry even offered Netanyahu a lucrative position on Oracle's board of directors, worth around $450,000. A sitting prime minister of Israel getting a corporate board seat from an American billionaire. Can you smell that? It smells like collusion. But it's not just Larry Ellison personally, it's Oracle as a company. Now, Oracle positions itself as a software company. Its claimed focus is on middleware and business apps, things like system integration, application servers, identity management, the stuff sleepiness is made out of. But if they're a software company, then why put an Israeli prime minister on your board of directors? Enter Oracle CEO, a woman named Safra Katz. Well, in 2015, she wrote an email that said, and I quote, "We have to fight this battle before the kids even get to college. We believe that we have to embed the love and respect for Israel in the American culture." I'm going to say it again. Embed the love and respect for Israel in American culture. That's for sure not about selling business-related software. They put Oracle stands with Israel on company screens, not just in the US, in over 180 countries where Oracle operates. Every employee, everywhere, seeing that message. And Safra Catz reportedly told employees that if they weren't pro Israel, then they shouldn't be working at the company. So, there's Larry Ellison's company. Now let's talk about his son, David Ellison. His company, Skydance, who we've talked about multiple times on this show, completed a massive merger to acquire Paramount, which owns CBS News. David Ellison decided last week to create a brand new position at CBS News that's never existed before: editor in chief over all news content. Then he brings in Bari Weiss, and according to the Financial Times, Weiss won Ellison over partly by taking a pro Israel stance. That is what sealed the deal for her getting the job. CBS News has been around for decades. Walter Cronkite, Edward R. Murrow, trusted names in journalism, and they never had an editor-in-chief position like this before. David Ellison creates it, and he puts Bari Weiss in charge. And look, I'm not saying that having an editor-in-chief is a bad thing, or even that creating the position in order to head all of your news departments is in and of itself malicious. I am questioning, however, the motives behind the creation of this specific position, and specifically placing Bari Weiss in charge. And what's odd to me is that Bari doesn't even report through the normal news division hierarchy. She doesn't go from leading the CBS News division to the heads of CBS or the board. She reports directly to David Ellison, the CEO. That means the person shaping editorial priorities at CBS News answers to the son of Netanyahu's personal friend and pay pig. Interesting. Now, CBS News and Bari Weiss are just one piece of this, because Larry Ellison's influence doesn't stop at traditional broadcast television. Remember when I said every connection led to three more? Well, the Ellisons are also deeply involved in another media takeover, one that affects a much younger audience, one that Netanyahu himself called the most important acquisition happening right now. Well, buckle up, buckaroos, because next we need to talk about TikTok. So, TikTok is owned by ByteDance, a Chinese tech company. Trump doesn't like that TikTok is owned by ByteDance, and in 2020 issues an executive order basically declaring TikTok a national security threat. 2022, Congress passes the No TikTok on Government Devices Act, banning the app from all government phones, tablets, and computers. 2024, the House passes H.R. 7521, which forces ByteDance to either sell TikTok or the app will be banned nationwide. 2025, Trump keeps pushing the deadline for the sale back, claiming he's the savior of TikTok. And finally, we're up to today, with reports emerging that China and the US are close to finalizing a deal for US ownership over the US operational side of TikTok. And in swoops a group of US investors ready to take on the difficult and thankless task of running the US side. But who are those investors? Well, if you've been listening for the past couple of minutes, then you already know. Larry Ellison's company, Oracle. They are one of the major companies getting control of TikTok. Oracle is getting roughly 45% ownership of TikTok US, but it's not just owning shares. Oracle gets control of the algorithm itself. They can rebuild it, retrain it, monitor it. They have complete control over the recommendation software, the thing that decides what content gets pushed to millions of users. So let's follow this one more time, okay? The guy who's Netanyahu's personal friend, who donated $16 million to pro-IDF organization, whose company wants to embed love for Israel and American culture, he now controls TikTok, which arguably is one of the largest culturally influencing apps in the country, if not the world. But Oracle's not alone. Let's look at who else is in on this deal. Rupert Murdoch. Yep. That Rupert Murdoch. Owner of Fox News, Rupert Murdoch. His outlets have been widely criticized for uncritically defending Israeli government actions and attacking pro-Palestinian activism. Michael Dell, owner of Dell Technologies. Dell's company supplied Israel's military with hardware, data systems, and AI technology. The UN actually mentioned Dell in a report about companies profiting from the Israeli occupation. Jeff Yass, Between 2011 and 2019, he donated over $16 million to anti Muslim and pro Israel groups. He gave $1.5 million to Citizens for a Nuclear Free Iran, which is basically an AIPAC group that opposed the Iran nuclear deal. Then you've got Silver Lake. Well, they're a private equity firm, and they partnered with Rafael. That's an Israeli defense company, literally owned by the Israeli government, to establish a research and development site in Israel. And finally, there's MGX. That is a United Arab Emirates government fund that takes a 15% stake in TikTok. Now, why is the UAE involved? Well, because of something called the Abraham Accords. Now, the Abraham Accords, for those who don't know, were a peace agreement, one more time, peace agreement, notice the air quotes, brokered by Trump between Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain. In 2020, the UAE normalized relations with Israel through these Abraham Accords, and since then, they've become deeply economically intertwined with Israel. MGX is connected to this company called G42. It's chaired by the UAE's National Security Advisor, and G42 was the first UAE company to open an office in Israel after the Accords. They partnered with Israeli defense companies on AI and surveillance technology. So, you've got UAE, government fund, and an Israeli-aligned tech company, both involved in TikTok ownership. Notice anything? Every single major investor in TikTok, US, has documented financial ties to the Israeli military or government. Every single one. This isn't a coincidence. And we know this was intentional because Netanyahu himself told us. In September 2024, he said, and this is on record, the most important purchase going on right now is TikTok. Number one.
We're going to have to use the tools of battle. You know, the weapons change over time. You can't fight today with swords. That doesn't work very well, okay? And you can't fight with cavalry. That doesn't work very well. And you have these new things, you know, like drones, things like that. I won't get into that. But we have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we're engaged. And the most important ones are the social media. And the most important purchase that is going on right now is
Followers.
TikTok. TikTok, number one. And I hope it goes through because it can be consequential. And the other one, what's the other one that's most important? X. That's very good. And, you know, so we have to talk to Elon. He's not an enemy. He's a friend. We should talk to him. Now, if we can get those two things, we get a lot, and I could go on other things, but that's not the point right now. We have to fight the fight, okay? To give direction to the Jewish people and give direction to our non-Jewish friends or those who could be our Jewish our friends. Are we going to succeed with everyone? No. Will there be a strong counterpoint? Yes.
Now, he didn't say an important purchase or one of several important developments. He said the most important. Number one. Then he said, we have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we're engaged. And the most important ones are on social media. But it's not just about who owns TikTok. It's also about who's moderating the content, who's deciding what gets removed, and that leads us to an organization called Cyberwell. Cyberwell presents itself as an NGO focused on fighting online hate speech and anti-Semitism. Sounds reasonable, right? Anti-Jewish sentiment has been on the rise in online spaces for a while now. I don't have to tell you guys what goes down in a 4chan chat room. But here's what they don't advertise. Cyberwell is closely linked to the Israeli government, and it's staffed by Israeli intelligence operatives. So, you've got former intelligence officers, people trained in information warfare, now deciding what content about Israel and Palestine gets flagged for removal on TikTok. First layer, Oracle. They control the algorithm, they decide what gets recommended, what shows up on your For You page, what goes viral. That's Larry Ellison's company, Netanyahu's friend. Second layer, Cyberwell. They handle content moderation. They decide what gets flagged as hate speech, what gets removed entirely, what gets accounts suspended. That's Israeli intelligence operatives. So let's say you're a Palestinian in Gaza. You post a video showing what happens in your neighborhood, destruction, casualties, the reality on the ground. that video has to go through two checkpoints. First, will the algorithm amplify it, or will Oracle systems bury it? Second, will Cyberwell flag it as problematic content and get it removed? And both of those checkpoints are controlled by people with direct ties to the Israeli government. And we're not speculating here, this is the actual structure. Oracle's control over the algorithm is public. Cyberwell's partnership with TikTok is documented. The staffing by Israeli intelligence operatives has been reported. The infrastructure for controlling the narrative about Israel Palestine on TikTok is built and operational. If you've used TikTok recently, you know what I'm talking about. So now, the same network that controls CBS News through Bari Weiss also controls TikTok through Oracle and Cyberwell. Traditional broadcast media and social media. Older Americans watching CBS and younger Americans scrolling TikTok, both shaped by the same interests, both filtered through the same ideological lens. Remember at the beginning, I said this connects to the Dark Enlightenment. Well, here's where those threads come together, because Larry Ellison isn't the only billionaire tech executive with deep Israeli ties who's taking over American media. Now, in our Dark Enlightenment video, we talked about Peter Thiel, billionaire founder of Playbill and Palantir, major Trump donor, the guy who basically created J.D. Vance's political career. We talked about how Thiel is connected to Curtis Yarvin, the anti-democratic ideologue who wants to replace democracy with corporate monarchy. But what we didn't get into was Thiel's Israel connections, and let me tell you, they're extensive. Let's start with Palantir, Thiel's data analytics company. In January 2024, Palantir signed a strategic partnership with the Israeli Ministry of Defense. They're providing technology for what they call war-related missions. Now, what does that mean in practice? AI-powered battlefield intelligence. Analyzing targets, proposing battle plans. This is the technology that helps the Israeli military decide who to strike and where. There's a specific AI targeting program that's been reported on called Lavender. It uses artificial intelligence to generate lists of targets in Gaza. Kill lists by AI. And when Thiel was asked about Palantir's role in the system, a system that's been connected to massive civilian casualties, here's what he said. Quote, "My bias is to defer to Israel. I believe that broadly the IDF gets to decide what it wants to do and that they're broadly in the right." Holy fucking shit. This is the guy whose company is providing the targeting AI. And he's saying he's not going to question how it's used. He defers to Israel. Relax, guy. It got serious enough that a Norwegian investor called Storebrand divested $24 million from Palantir. They cited Palantir's provision of AI-based predictive policing system that supports Israeli surveillance of Palestinians in their divestment. But it's not just corporate. Thiel has personal connections to Netanyahu. In 2017, he visited Israel and met with Netanyahu directly. He spoke to tech entrepreneurs in Tel Aviv, praising Israel's economic success. Then, in September 2024, Thiel attended a wedding in Jerusalem, and some of the other guests at that wedding later met with Netanyahu as well. Thiel also invested in multiple Israeli intelligence-linked companies. There's one called Carbine. It's an emergency response company. It was co-founded by former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, and it's staffed with former Mossad operatives. Another is Mensch Capital, an Israel-based venture capital firm that invests in Israeli tech startups. So Thiel is using his funds to pump money into the Israeli tech ecosystem. Now, in our last video, we covered how Peter Thiel created J.D. Vance's political career. $15 million in campaign finance. The bending of the knee to Trump for the VP position with Thiel's personal help. The introduction to Curtis Yarvin's anti-democratic ideology. But what we didn't cover was Vance's Israel policy. And it's crucial to understand this network. Vance's foreign policy is basically America first, but also Israel. We pull back from foreign entanglements, stop sending aid everywhere, and focus on domestic priorities, except Israel. Israel gets full support, full funding, full everything. Vance backed Israel's Gaza offensive. He said Israel should be empowered to eliminate Hamas commanders and military units. No qualifications, no concerns about civilian casualties. He introduced bills to defund colleges that had pro Palestinian protests or encampments. And when Biden was considering immigration protections for Palestinians fleeing the violence, Vance wrote him urging him not to do it. He called Palestinians a population of potentially radicalized individuals. Now, where this gets even more fucked up is Curtis Yarvin's views on Palestinians. Yarvin has called Palestinian toddlers genetically guilty. Not adults, not militants, toddlers, children. Genetically guilty is the most supervillain way to describe fucking babies that I've ever heard. He's defended killing civilians as necessary evil. He's been described as a vocal admirer of Israel's ethno-state model. So that's the ideological foundation. The person shaping the vice president's worldview believes in truly heinous shit about Palestinian people. And that ideology flows through Thiel, who provides the AI that helps target people in Gaza, into Vance, who has actual political power as vice president. These people are part of a network designed to take over American media and the tinfoil hat wearing MAGA, the ones who want the swamp drained and think George Soros is behind everything the Democrats do, are blatantly ignoring the real world conspiracy slapping them across the face. So it's not just insane American billionaires doing insane sociopathic billionaire shit. The Israeli government itself is actively running influence operations on American soil. Multi-million-dollar programs, some registered as foreign agents, some operating covertly, all designed to shape what Americans think, what Congress does, and what you're allowed to see online. And most of these operations are flying completely under the radar. Let me show you what we found. First, here's the Israeli Ministry of Diaspora Affairs. This is an actual government ministry, and they paid $2 million to a consulting firm called Stoic. The explicit purpose: influence U.S. Democratic lawmakers on Gaza. $2 million from a foreign government to shape how American congresspeople vote on a foreign policy issue. This got reported, it's documented, and most Americans have no idea it happened. Well, except for Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's been low-key right on the money with her criticisms on Israeli influence in U.S. politics. What fucking world are we living in? Then there's Brad Parscale. You might remember him. He was Trump's campaign manager in 2016. Well, now he's working for Israel with an $18 million per year contract. What he's doing for that money? AI-driven, pro-Israel messaging, using artificial intelligence to generate and distribute content that shapes American public opinion in favor of Israel. Brad Parscale is registered as a foreign agent under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. That's a law that requires anyone working on behalf of a foreign government, company, or organization to register with the U.S. Department of Justice. This is official. It's legal. A former Trump campaign manager is now a registered agent of a foreign government, pumping out AI-generated propaganda slop. Next up, something called the Esther Project. This is run by the Israeli Foreign Ministry and managed by a company called Bridge Partners LLC. They were given a budget of $900,000. What they do? Well, they pay social media influencers between $6,000 and $7,000 per post to create pro-Israel content. Think about that. Influencers you follow, people who seem like they're just sharing their opinions, some of them are getting paid $6,000 a post by the Israeli government, and the influencers often don't disclose this. You're seeing what looks like organic support, but it's actually paid foreign government propaganda. Unlike us here at The Dump, who are paid nothing to do what we do, so, consider subscribing and sharing this video so we can fix that and get some of that sweet, sweet control money. Now, this next one is really disturbing. There's an organization called the Israel on Campus Coalition, and according to undercover reporting, they've built a massive surveillance operation. Jacob Babe, who was the executive director, described it in detail. He said the research operation is very high-tech. When he got there, a few years earlier, the budget was $3,000, but it grew to $1.5 million, then over $2 million. What are they spending it on? Well, it's simple. Spying on American citizens, specifically students and activists who support Palestinian rights. They use advanced surveillance technology. They monitor social media from over Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, blogs, TikTok, everything. They have geolocation data. They're tracking people's movements and conversations in real time. BAME says the key to their work is to work securely and anonymously. So you've got an organization with links to Israel intelligence, using Israeli surveillance technology, spying on American students on American college campuses, building dossiers, tracking their activities, finding vulnerabilities. And they share this information with the Anti Defamation League, which then uses it to create reports labeling these students as threats. This web of interconnectivity just keeps getting larger and larger. Some target lawmakers directly. Some target public opinion through social media. Some conduct surveillance on critics. Some are registered. Some are covert. But they're all working towards the same goal: control the American conversation about Israel and Palestine. Private power plus government operations equals total control over the narrative. So when you see content about Israel and Palestine, you have to ask, is the algorithm messing with its reach? Well, that's Oracle and Netanyahu's personal friends. Is it getting flagged for removal? Well, that's Cyberwell, Israeli intelligence. Is the influencer being paid? That could be the Esther Project, Israeli Foreign Ministry. Is the politician being lobbied? Well, that could be the Diaspora Affairs operation. And this is just Israel-Palestine. Imagine this level of influence operating, running on every foreign policy issue that matters to a foreign government. All right, let's take a step back and see the big picture, because we've covered a lot of ground, and I need you to see how all these pieces fit together. There are two parallel tracks working towards the same goal. So we're going to do a quick recap of everything we've talked about so far. First, you have Larry Ellison, second richest person in the world, Netanyahu's personal friend, largest IDF donor. His company, Oracle, wants to embed the love and respect for Israel in American culture. He controls CBS News through his son, David, and editor-in-chief, Bari Weiss. He controls TikTok's algorithm through Oracle's 45% ownership. Then you have Peter Thiel, who provides AI targeting systems to the Israeli military through Palantir, says he defers to Israel in killing decisions, created the vice president of the United States with $15 billion, both billionaires, both have direct relationships with Netanyahu, both own pieces of American media infrastructure. Then you've got the Israeli government running direct operations, $2 million to lobby US lawmakers on Gaza, $18 million annually to Brad Parscale for AI-generated messaging, $900K paying for influencers, over $2 million for the Israel on Campus Coalition to surveil American students. It's over $30 million annually in documented programs. The real total is almost certainly higher. These tracks aren't separate. They reinforce each other. In social media, you have TikTok. Oracle, that's Ellison, controls the algorithm. Cyberwell, Israel intelligence, controls moderation. All other major investors have documented pro-Israel ties. Politics, Thiel creates Vance, who is influenced by Curtis Yarvin, who calls Palestinian children genetically guilty. The ideology, the money, and the power all flow in the same direction. So when you're scrolling TikTok and you see or don't see content about Gaza, you're experiencing the result of this network. When you're watching CBS News and certain stories get emphasized while others get downplayed, you're experiencing the result of this network. When politicians take positions that seem disconnected from public opinion, you're experiencing the result of this network. When students get surveilled and doxxed for supporting Palestinian rights, you're experiencing the result of this network. This isn't a future threat. This is happening right now. Bari Weiss sits at CBS News, shapes editorial priorities, answers to the son of Netanyahu's friend. Oracle controls what you see on TikTok. Israeli intelligence operatives decide what gets removed. The vice president was created by someone whose company helps generate kill lists in Gaza. Surveillance systems are monitoring American students in real time, building dossiers. Remember how we started. Our last video was about the Dark Enlightenment, Curtis Yarvin, Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, and their plan to dismantle democracy. This is the other half of that story. This is about who gets to control the information environment once democratic institutions are weakened. And the answer is billionaires with direct ties to foreign governments and ideologies that justify the slaughter of thousands of people. So what do you do with this information? Well, first, understand that when you consume media, any media, you need to ask who owns this, who funds it, what are their stated goals? Like us here at The Dump, we own it, we fund it. Our stated goal is to provide leftist media content. Second, when you see influence campaigns online, recognize them. Paid influencers, anonymous accounts, coordinated messaging. It's not organic. It's a $30 million operation. Third, support independent journalism. The only reason we know any of this is because of investigative journalists, often working for small outlets, often underfunded. They did the digging. Subscribe, donate, share their work. And fourth, talk about it. The network's power depends on complexity and invisibility. It depends on people thinking this is too complicated to explain, or I'll sound like a conspiracy theorist. But it's not a conspiracy, it's documented. What started as a question, who is Bari Weiss and why is she running CBS News, became a map of how power actually works. Not through votes, not through democratic processes, but through billionaires buying media companies, foreign governments running influence operations, and ideologues who believe in genocide shaping the people in power. The infrastructure is built. It's operational. And you know it exists. And just for the record, this has been about Israel, Netanyahu, and the IDF. This is not about the Jewish people. Plenty of Jewish individuals, both in the US and in Israel, oppose what the government is doing. They oppose the genocide of the Palestinian people. They oppose Netanyahu. This isn't about Jewish people or the Jewish faith at all. It's about a state government with so much influential power that they are willing to throw their own people under the bus if it means gaining further control over land and others. Now, if this video helped you understand something you didn't before, share it, because the more people who see the connections, the harder it becomes for this network to operate in the shadows.